TV.
All right, on the big story this morning, we talk about the future of the NRM. I speak to an interesting guest. He's a member of the NRM. He's been writing a couple of articles which have excited some, they have disconcerted others. We'll talk about that and where he sees the NRM going forward. That and more coming up on the big story. All right, on the big story, I'm hosting Odrek Rwabogo. We're having a one-on-one banter, but let's dig into the serious stuff. Odrek Rwabogo, good morning. How are you? How have you been? Where have you been?
Good morning. I've been doing my farming and doing business. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a farmer, but I like to write, and that's what I've been doing.
And how is it going?
Very good. Could be better. Some of the issues that I've been writing for the last 25 years.
25 years you've been writing?
Yes.
What have you been writing? We only began to see your writings recently.
Well, I have some books that I pretty soon you will see. I have some manuscripts that I haven't had time to put out, but I write every night. But in the last 1.5 years, I think, 62 weeks now, I have been writing consistently on economy, on social services, on health, education, all sorts of subjects. But in the last, I think, 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, there's been a bit of controversy. I wrote about institutions. Institutions, for me, as everyone knows, are the guarantors of the future. Human beings are fallible. We do business and set up companies. We marry, we take kids to school because we are worried about the future. We set up institutions so that they can guarantee the stability of businesses, of nations.
We're going to dig into the question of institutions and how you've been writing about them, but let's first get the elephant out of the room. Of course, unfortunately or fortunately for you, you're a businessman and an entrepreneur, and people should know you for that, but when they hear of Odrek Rwabogo, they think of the president's son-in-law, which, you know, okay, there you are. But let me ask you this even as we start. You're joining the NRM, you're an NRM member, you tried to run for vice chairperson Western, that did not come through. Did you join the NRM by default, or you joined it because there are certain ideals about the NRM that you joined? Perhaps more directly, why did you join the NRM?
I joined the NRM in 1992 as a university student in my first or second year, because it's run on ideals that inspire young people. I've read Marx, I've read Mao, I've read Samora Machel, I've read Nyerere, and for me the NRM stands out because it's a uniter, brings together people of different religions, different persuasions. It's been since 1973 the largest recruiter in Uganda than any of the other political parties. You can have Moses Ali, who was a minister in 1975. He's a minister today, 40-something years later. You can have Evelyn Anite, who maybe was born in 1988, serving in the same government. You join organizations because you're convinced of their mission, you're convinced of their principles. You join them so that you can improve them, so you can play a role for your generation and make a contribution. So it's not forced. That's my belief.
Joining them in 92, and you juxtapose that image against 2017, would you say the NRM is still on track? There are those that founded this party, that were actually a part of the start of the pulling together of what we know as the NRM today, and they have long moved on because they feel it lost track. It is no longer sticking to what it is that they set out to do. So in your case, 1992 to date, would you say they are still on track?
You judge organizations by their performance. Uganda has come from so deep, from so far. If you look at, for example, one of the subjects I write about is exports. In 1991, when I joined university, Entebbe Airport alone was taking 1,300 tons. Today they do about 34,000 tons. It's an increment. In relative terms, we could have done better if we did some things, which I'm complaining about. But overall, the movement in terms of establishing security, in terms of expanding space to speak, You see a lot of useless newspapers that should not see the light of day, gutter press, they are on the street. In terms of doing certain things, the movement has done very well. But every organization renews itself. Every organization prepares itself for the challenges of tomorrow. The best way to shape tomorrow is to work on it today, and that's what I'm doing through writing, through teaching, and over the years I work at the base. Don't worry about the establishment, the handlers, ministers, but our people on the ground, people, because the NRM was born out of common people. Common people gave it food, clothing, medicine, until people of ties like you joined to become ministers much later. Those are the people I worry about. Those are the people we should continue to empower, because if they are unhappy, the triggers of change will come suddenly and we will not know what to do if we don't continue improving our performance.
When you talk about a lot has changed without a doubt, and I've heard the president many times quote this and the other, but would you not say the same of a child? A child that's been raised by Odrek and a child that's been raised by another ordinary folk who probably doesn't have much at their disposal. 20 years later, both of these will be grown up, so whether or not you feed the child exquisitely well and so on, there might be, of course, a bit of challenges here and there, but a couple of years later, it's expected that the child will be taller, might have a little bit more weight than they did, and so that's the expected. There are some people that feel the NRM takes a lot more credit than it deserves when it says 30 plus years later, you know, we have more buildings, we have better roads, you know, our economy has grown and so on. And those people, their premise is that regardless, in spite of the NRM, there was going to be some of this progress. How do you respond to that?
Progress doesn't happen unless a few people commit themselves. People who denigrate the example of the movement, the sacrifice of common people. Look, peasants took up arms and removed what you would call a professional army of 60,000 people. Go to the UPDF, the older crop, the Pekosis, the General Tumwines. These were they were teachers, they were lawyers. They joined because there was trouble. Now, to bring down that trouble, first of all, to restore political order, to restore military order, just go in our neighborhood and see what insecurity means, because nobody invests when there is insecurity. To restore military order, restore political order, expand the frontiers of freedom in terms of worship, religion, in terms of media. I don't take those things for granted. To have an economy that was bleeding, that was negative, under the ground, and be able to build $28 billion worth of an economy of GDP. It's a good job. But like I said, that's not enough. I am looking at two things, for example. There's a company called Unilever. If you've used soap this morning, or if you've brushed your teeth, Unilever, this is its market. Unilever is a 120-year-old company. Just 2 weeks ago, another company called Kraft, Heinz Kraft, the guys who make ketchup, were trying to buy them for $143 billion. Unilever supplies this market, but it does not take any ingredients from this market. It doesn't take products out of agriculture. When are we going to be able, as an economy, to do deals of that nature? South Africa recently sold SAB Miller, who own one of the beer companies in Uganda, for $107 billion. 20% of that went to the farmers. When do we do deals like that that put us on a pedestal as an economy so that people begin to look at us attractively? Why do you think we get low caliber investors? Why isn't there Intel here, Microsoft, Apple? They are not investing here because we are not investing deeply in science. We are not creating software writers. Our economy has been run in the last 30 years on aid and loans. And surely there are other ways of growing this economy, and that's what bothers me. To create jobs for young people, to double our exports. I am a processor of milk. This market, I produce 50,000 liters a day. It is consumed in 6 months. Production of 1 day, 6 months, because only 10% of this market can take UHT. But Nigeria is a $1.3 billion market. I cannot get to that market because to export out of Uganda into Nigeria, a liter costs you $1.5. That's 5,500 shillings more than the money that you buy your 1 liter of UHT in our supermarket. To do that, we have to think afresh, to put this economy and take the image of you depend on donors, you depend on aid, you depend on loans. To take that image, you know, I can go, let me just give you a quick example. When I was in P5 in 1980, there were only 5 companies called private equity funds. Private equity funds come to you saying, and they say, what business do you run? They invest in your business. They also manage it. They bring skill, they bring technology, they bring management, they bring money. There were only 5. Today there are 6,000 of those in the world. They sit on $1.4 trillion cash. Uganda only got 300 million last year. South Africa got 1.4 billion. You're trying to create jobs for young people in agriculture. Who tells you you cannot attract that money in your economy? Those are the things that bother me. But instead of focusing on those, we are focusing on aberration. Rwabogo is fighting the president. That's not correct.
Let me ask.
At all.
When we read these your articles that you write, clearly you can see, and like you say, it's a man that is disturbed, that is frustrated that certain things are not working a certain way. When you're in the private sector, the way you guys operate, you know, private sector is different from government. With the private sector, it's delivery, it's results, and so on. In government, it's a little bit different. But as you write, as you speak, do you feel you're being listened to, or are you on a head-banging project, trying to squeeze water out of a rock?
There was an Italian called Machiavelli. Machiavelli was arrested, I can't remember the year. He had helped the Medici popes and done a lot of work. They arrested him and banished him to the farm. And he said, the only thing I can do here is to write so that someone can listen. But if they don't listen, I'll do some plays so that someone out there can get attracted to my message because of the plays. For me, I think it takes time to convert people to what you think. I have certain thoughts, and if I bottle up those thoughts, I will take away wind from my generation, because many people hunker down to fear. They want to pay school fees, they want to do their job, but the country needs to grow. If we don't speak out, us in the movement, we speak out because we want to strengthen the movement. We speak out not because we want to destroy it, but to give it a future. Let me give you an example why I agreed to come to this show. I lost a friend called Maumbe Mukwana. We buried him on Saturday. I had interviewed him so many times, and I thought I would see him. At his funeral, when they were doing the normal heroes shooting in the air where they fire some volleys, one of the shells came and fell on my shoulder and went down to my shoe, and in my spirit I felt, pick it, keep it in your pocket. There's an end of a generation, there's a beginning of another. When we finished, I went to see Beth, his wife. Her first word was, Odrek, all this stuff I read in the newspapers, it is causing us problems. I said, Beth, what I write is this and this and this. She said, but that's not understood. That's when I felt that at the base where I have worked for the last 25 years, whether it's youth funds, whether it's youth venture capital scheme, whether it's starting youth councils, I have been there. If my writing is going to confuse our base, not the establishment, then it makes sense for me to go out and explain. What I do is to strengthen, not to destroy. That's what I wake up doing every day.
Odrek, you're cutting out yourself as one of those within the NRM that want to see betterment. You are saying the NRM has done some good, but we want to see better. And I'm wondering, are there enough of you, the likes of you, within the NRM? And because you see, the challenge there has been when the likes of you do arise, they are branded rebels and they are derided, and many times they are thrown under the bus, as
I
it
think
were.
for me, branding is one thing, but having a thought is another. There are hundreds, probably millions of movement supporters, young people in business, in private life, in public sector, who really wake up concerned about the future and they want to do a good job. But there are few of us who are willing to take a stand. And I know in life, the movement would never have been what it became if a few did not take a stand. Now, when you take a stand, accept that you'll be misrepresented, you'll be misunderstood, you'll be... In Uganda, there's nothing now that you do that doesn't have a bearing on wanting a position. He's doing this because he wants to be MP. He's doing this. Who told you? Odrek, I employ 400 people. It's tough to pay the bill at the end of the month, to pay their salaries. This economy is owed 8 trillion shillings, private sector. I have a legitimate concern. I have views about how you improve exports, how you improve agriculture. I am not a casual onlooker, observer. I am a participant. To have these views and bottle them is simply to say, I know something. The Baganda say, Olwata nanyinimu nalindu manyi naye sayogera. I don't want to do that. Don't worry about branding. I never worry about that because I strike from good intentions. My main challenge is you, the purveyors of information, Ugandans who read this newspaper called Red Pepper. I want to appeal to them because I never speak to Red Pepper. My articles, my column is very clear. For example, I said, how do ruling classes emerge? In Europe, labor and capital, there is a fight. People who have land, people who have money, they set up factories. They employ workers. Out of that, you create constitutions on which a society grows. Now, in Africa, because land and labor, capital and labor were low, only in South Africa where capital is white and labor is black. In other places, small enclave economies run by administrators, neo-colonial administrators, chiefs. This is why you see people, when a minister or an MP goes to a village, people are asking for money instead of discussing policy. Red Pepper picks it and says, Rwabogo says, Museveni, pack your bags and go home. Where is the understanding? I have written about inequality. How many kids under 18 have blankets in northern Uganda versus the west or central? Why don't you debate that? How many containers return empty wagons? 96,000 wagons return every year. That's about 30% of, we bring in 300,000 containers, 100,000 return empty to Mombasa. No more than that. Only 96 return loaded. The balance is empty. Aren't you concerned that we are not improving production at farms, FIRM and FA? Aren't you concerned that we are left behind in terms of science? We are not creating products of complexity. We are in a low productive economy, and our children's children will blame us for knowing things and not speaking out and not doing them. The NRM has the widest advantage because as a mass party it can force change in policy, it can force change in behavior. If you don't do it through the NRM, who do you want to do it with?
The general perception out there, Odrek, is that you have access to the president, understandably so, you're his son-in-law. Have you had occasion to share some of these thoughts and bounce them off of him? Because you see, unfortunately, in this good country, if you want something to work, you've got to go to the president. When you go to the minister, many times they cannot do much, so you've got to run to the president. Have you shared your thoughts with him?
First of all,
even about the breakdown of the system, of you cannot go to a minister and he executes things.
Two things. Ugandans want, say the people around the president or his family are deeply involved in his decisions. Many of us know that's not correct. So in other words, they are saying this is wrong, but at the same time, if there is a problem, you're close to the president. Are we building a monarchy or we elected a head of state? The issues I speak about are issues to do with our generation. They are issues to be debated. I have had conversations several times with the president. Even as newspapers write all these silly things, he's told me what to do. Arrange a session, call your team, I will speak to them. If we shift the weight of all those Ugandans who are concerned about the future, 5 million members of the movement who elected the president last year, if we shift power to one center and remove these, what country are we creating? I think people should be happy that I'm speaking to the base, I'm energizing my generation, I am speaking to the president, I'm creating minimum level of engagement that will create a debate about the future. People shouldn't hunker down to fear. To speak out about the things we should do is not wrong. It doesn't mean ill. It doesn't mean that you're fighting for a chair or anything. These are matters we should have a conversation about, and they are not even partisan, because listen, when a business exports, it gets into the global value chain, it brings more money in the economy, it employs more young people. Is that partisan, creating jobs for young people? That for me is my concern, and that's why I will not shut up.
When you talk about the breakdown of institutions, something we have known for donkey's years, some people have decided to resign to their fate, things will not work, at least not soon. Where do you see the genesis of all this, the real cause of the problem? Is it bad leadership? Is it a lack of interest? Or is it actually intentional? Intentional to the extent that let's make sure the institutions do not work so that everybody runs to me or runs to a small group. We are the ones in charge. It's at our behest. They are at our mercy.
Joel, I think it's the level of productivity of an economy. Economies, really, the material conditions determine the kind of people you have in government. If you have people who are peasants and quickly become ministers, if you have many of us, if your grandfather had a bank account in Greenland's Bank in the 1960s, maybe you are quasi middle class. But many of us, I am the first generation in business. I was the first in my family at university. I am a first businessman. We are all trying to build capital, trying to build labor, trying to build certain levels of productivity that change our country. Now, to expect so much out of us very quickly is also wrong. Even when institutions are available. I watched, may the viewers forgive me for using this example. I watched a man called Atoke facing Parliament.
Francis Atoke, the Solicitor General.
They said, how did this money end up on your account? He said, ask the President. But you are the Solicitor General. You have an independent institution. You have your thinking. Why should they ask the President? You have a conscience. You could have said no. Our society is still weak. Our society is tribal. Our society is religious. We make concessions here and there. But the change that I see is that young people, parties are dying. Look at the US. Mr. Trump is not a Republican. He's a single individual on his cell phone with people who are dissatisfied, and he becomes president, and the party appeals to him to work with him. If we are not careful, young people are not structured. They are not, I want to be this party, I want to be this religion. Their concerns are jobs, their concerns is safety, their concerns is, can I grow in this country? Do I have someone I can take my views to and they listen to me? If we don't focus on them, because the means of engagement is a cell phone, you can see a lot of lies on social media, people believe them. If you have a party that is not responding to that, then you have a problem. So for me, I understand a bit of this country. Even when the president wants to do good, the society doesn't allow him. The same ministers, the same MPs, the same are the ones asking for favors. Have you seen where people in UK or other developed markets, people ask for money for treatment, money for school fees when they are MPs or ministers? No, they ask for policy change. They debate what the interest rates should be. They debate financing of projects. So even if the president strikes out to do well, our society is still weak. And that's why those of us who are educated, those of us who have had a chance to go to school, we should say no to that and bring some hope in politics, bring some hope in planning, bring some hope in economy. Say that you don't need to run an economy simply on loans and aid. World Bank recently raised $70 billion to lend to developing countries through the markets in private equity funds. Why can't we go there as a country? These views, in my generation, something tells me the people ahead of me have done the best. Don't judge them. The next level...
Shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we judge them? Why shouldn't we hold them to the account? And maybe that's the other problem that we have, Odrek. We look at our leaders and they've become sacrosanct figures. They cannot go wrong. We cannot criticize them.
Kampala in 1986 had 10 warlords. Every hill had a warlord. There was simply no food in this town. There was insecurity. The economy had regressed 14%. Now, if you are going to judge the leaders of today, judge them against that. But obviously, it's 30 years. It's not yesterday. In those 30 years, they have not governed alone. Remember, there are about 200 people, ministers, RDCs, 200 people running the country. Many of us have pulled out instead of pushing the change we require in the NRM, pushing the change we require in the economy, so that a few bureaucrats do not determine our future. That's really what I feel. The NRM does not discuss whether they should impose tax on agriculture or not. No. It is decided by bureaucrats in Ministry of Finance. Who elected them? Who tells you me who employs 400 people, who has a farm, who is processing milk, who sees the disconnect in agriculture, who sees policies not working? I shouldn't have a view. Now, when you have a view, then you are fighting someone. I find that very cheap. And for me, I want to appeal to our base. Listen to these views. These views will save the movement. They mean very well. The intention is very good. The NRM is strong. Is only as strong as we want to make it. Huh? Look, we are not attracting young people now based on conviction. We meet them on money or jobs. And I joined the movement based on conviction, based on the reading and writing I did. Don't you want millions of them to be like me, who are convinced that it is simply not money or a job or a politician, but because they believe this is a vehicle that can guarantee our future?
You
That's
talk
what I
about
work at.
your intentions being good, and there's people that believe you when they read your articles and they hear you speak, but then there's the other side of the coin that don't quite believe you. And I'm sure you have met some of them. And their view is that you speak as a frustrated man, even though the issues you're raising are very critical, but they feel, seems like Odrek has been pushed away from the eating table, and so he's frustrated, he's angry. You have met them, you have had some of them. How do you respond to that?
Now, there are many people I meet who support these views, but they are silent. There are many people I've met who say, what you're doing is right. Perhaps the channels you are using misunderstand you and they are wrong. But I have also met people in the establishment who don't want to rock the boat, who are worried about their jobs, who are worried about why is it you? If it is not me, who should it be? Now, and this is not about frustration. Let's just say that it's disappointment that we're not doing the things we should be doing. But disappointment is a good emotion. It makes you see things differently. Secondly, what is eating? This whole idea that we reduce governance to eating. You see newspapers drawing cartoons, whoever gets a job, there's chicken bones. It means that your society, its thinking, its perception of the world, they are not thinking of doing the mega deals that I spoke about of Unilever to improve agriculture. They are thinking of a job, they are thinking of my tribe, my kingdom, my religion. We must rein in that. If I don't spend my time reining in that, as a member of my generation, I will have let them down.
When many young people join your political party, and I've met some, you've actually alluded to that, who remember the time they were registering folks to join the NRM? I met some and asked them, so why are you joining? And some told me, well, just in case this is my ticket to a job. I don't exactly believe in the party's ideals, if any. Others thought, actually, as you queue up, you'll be given money. Of course, they were disappointed that did not happen for them. If this continues to be the trend for the NRM, where do you see it happening as far as its future, if it decides to discard and disregard your views and stick to the way things are now, the current modus operandi? I
think it's very presumptuous for me to think because I hold these views so people should take them right away. These views need to be listened more, be explained more, be taught more, and encourage other people to come out and speak these views in the love of the movement, in strengthening the movement. Secondly, what you're saying is very true. I know a man who I went to Chankwanzi to teach 2-3 weeks ago. A group of people came and someone said, I came here not to do this useless stuff, but I was told that you're paying people here, I need my money to return. And he insisted. When there was no money, he went back. Every organization relies on teaching. You cannot... a man called Jesus did not have a car, did not leave a building. He simply taught a few people. And today there are 2 billion Christians worldwide. When you continue to teach, and to teach is not to go to Chankwanzi, it is to reach a sub-county, to reach a parish, to translate material, to remind people of what you run on, what your values are, so that if they see something wrong, they can hold a mirror and say, this is who we are. Because if you don't hold a mirror to what you do, down the road, many people have joined the movement. They don't know what they are joining. So eventually we will have something ununderstandable and we will have trouble. That for me is why I told you that this misrepresentation by Red Pepper and other news channels, I find it absurd, because when you shake our base, where I spend my time working, then I have no business. I can stop writing tomorrow, but that won't take away my teaching. I'll go to other channels and still teach. So I emphasize this. Yes, people should join the organization to find work, because this organization is in government. But you should go for something higher than that. If there is no work, you can stick in and find your own work. We've built roads, infrastructure, water, energy, but we still have a mindset that thinks binatebigenda to a cent. Cash is somewhere in politics. If we don't change that, the NRM will have a lot of problems.
You've talked about the older guard beginning to hand over in a way to the younger folks. How would you like this, your party, the NRM, to handle it? The president is not growing any younger. Constitutionally, he's barred from standing in the next election. We are waiting to see what happens around that. There's still a huge debate around that. How would you like this issue of transition, of succession, to be handled?
Well, there are two forms of transitions. First is economy. When you build an economy, give it roads, give it infrastructure, and give it stability. You are saying entrepreneurs come and take advantage. And there are so many. There are now 450,000 businesses out of 6 million households. It is still small, but it is growing. Economic transition for me worries me, because you need to change the land tenure systems. You need to reach each business of young people and train them how to compete in the real world. We're not doing that. That's part of my problem. The second form of transition is political. When you have, I said, Moses Ali, 45 years ago minister, Evelyn Anite in the same government. You are looking at also the age, you are looking at perhaps ideas. Those transitions happen. However, for me, I think that the best form of transition is have a conversation. Don't fear to open a debate within the organization about what we are facing. We got 300 to 400,000 young people, more votes, who voted the movement in the last election. The opposition had a combined 1.5. They are voting the opposition not because there is any idea on trade, on export. They are voting it because there is no conversation here. There is no retooling of our economy, retooling of our politics to make it serious. They don't see serious people in politics. They see a lot of katemba. Politics has become red pepper, which is gutter press, which is pornography. That's what people quote. That, for me, you stop inspiring people. You stop getting people with inspired action to follow you. When you have a debate, people will come like a magnet, and they will see the future, and whatever the future brings, whichever candidate, even if it's the president returning, it is done in a transparent manner, and everybody can see 10 years from now, this organization can still hold its handles. That debate for me is what I'm looking for.
Do you have political ambitions, Odrek?
What's political ambition? I ran for the vice chairman of NRM in 2015. I went across the country.
Do you still have those, or you gave them up after they told you, you know what, first go for LC1 or that
I am
kind
a
of thing?
businessman first and foremost. I am a father, I am a parent, I am a teacher. I'm engaged at all levels. I want a government and a system that I'm proud of, that takes our views, that gives us room for a discussion. It's not about who sits where. Look, if I am a businessman and I pay tax and I employ people, I'm playing a role in my country. Being a minister or being an MP or anything doesn't replace that role. I simply want a discussion and a country and a government and leadership that I am proud of. That's all.
I think it is a good thing. A great philosopher, I'm sure you've read about him. Plato once said, I may disagree with what you say, but I will defend to death your right to say it. Do you feel your party has done enough to allow the opposition, disagree with them as they might, to have space in this Uganda? I would like to believe Uganda is big enough for all of us, but sometimes it looks like, no, you don't fit here, and so we'll deal with you heavily, and so on. Do you feel enough of that is being done? Because you see, it's important to create the jobs, build the roads, etc., etc. But you see, human beings inherently, they like to have their own opinions, which may not be the same as yours. They could even be totally wrong, but that they should be allowed to air those out, that they should be listened to. And when sometimes their views hold water, I don't see any devil in them being taken on by the NRM. It doesn't make them any less.
I'm glad you quoted Plato. Well, there's a writer called Mark Twain, and he said, if you find yourself on the side of the majority, stop, pause, think again. Maybe you're wrong. He's basically saying that if you are in charge, if you are many, you need voices that can see that to keep the many, you must reach out. In my opinion, it's too much to ask the movement to build the opposition. I have never seen any government in power that seeks to empower the opposition
not
to
build,
replace
but
it.
allow them space, at least, at the very least.
In my opinion, if you want me to be very honest, I take the largest opposition, FDC, to be the angry wing of NRM. Because you look at the policies they run on, you look at what's your policy on job creation, on agriculture, on East Africa integration. Not much, but it's about Museveni. If you remove Museveni, things will be okay. Now, but we think that Uganda is more than President Museveni. He's done a wonderful job. His generation has played a role. Why don't we see some minimum level of engagement with society, with you lawyers, professionals? Because remember, peasants are mobilized, but they don't lead. It's us. What's the engagement of Mr. Besigye, for example, with economists on the next economy this country should have? When you don't see that, you really worry. You see someone who is interested in this and not the other. But to answer your question directly, I think that in this country, there is minimum space for you to have a conversation. But people hunker down to fear. You have free media, you have right of association, you have parties. Demonstrations, good as they are not the only tool of communication. And that's what I see, that many people think that if you're allowed to demonstrate, that's when the country is democratic. I think it takes more than that. It starts with your family. It starts with conversations you have around your table. It starts in your offices. It starts in ability to accept alternative views and not fear, and reach out, knowing that you work for a greater good called Uganda. So, in my opinion, I would rather have these conversations in the NRM, because the next 5-10 years, you really need to speak to the movement people to be able to see that they need to shift position on certain things if they have to gain new ground with young people. That for me is a major bother.
Let's wrap it up this way. A Ghanaian professor, Professor Steve Adey, once said that leadership is cause, everything else is effect. John C. Maxwell is another of those leadership scholars, experts. He once said that everything rises and falls on leadership. We've got many levels of leadership in this country. We also have got the fountain of honor, His Excellency the President. Let's imagine he's watching this show. What would you tell the President in a minute?
First of all, the President and his generation have been multipliers. You know, there are two categories of leaders. Multipliers are those who allow you to do what you must do. Another category is called diminishers. Don't do anything unless I've told you to do it. For me, the conversation about the movement and the future of the country is free young people, free conversations, free the economy, so that you see what you most likely are not able to see. The President doesn't govern alone. I really want people to know that all his decisions, there's a cabinet of 85 people, there's a parliament of so many people, there are RDCs, there are LC5 chairmen. They have a role in how you shape the future of the country. If we shift all our weight to one person, we are running in trouble. You're putting your eggs in one basket. Yet the movement was founded by simple, common peasants who led it to a point where the intelligentsia, the big people now become ministers. That's what I think.
Odrek Rwabogo, it's been a pleasure talking to you this morning. Thank you for joining us.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
Coming up is my opinion.